Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the November 13th, 2012 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with me as Commissioner Rhonda Allen will lead our pledge and our prayer.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to live in this land of freedom. We're able to come together and apply your wisdom and discernment that you bestow upon us so that we can lead and guide the folks of Rutherford County the best way that you would have us do. We thank you also for the veterans, dear Lord, who have given their lives so that we can have these freedoms. I just want to ask special blessings, Lord, on several of those that are close to this commission or having health issues, and all of our citizens as we enter flu season, that you'd be with each one and just continue to heal us. It's in your gracious name that we pray. Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Seated. Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Gail, would you call the roll, please?
Rhonda Allen. Here. Richie Boland. Here. Veronica Buchanan. Will Jordan. Mike Cush. Present. Craig Lynch. Here. Pettis Reed. Here. Stanlin. Here. Mike Vaught. Here. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Commissioner Allen mentioned several of us being sick. A member of our commission is ill tonight. Veronica Buchanan is ill, and she's going to have some tests run tomorrow, so you guys be in special thoughts for her as she goes through this period, her and her family both. Okay. Codes Department, you have the report in front of you. David, any comments at all? Take a minute to look at that if you have any questions. If not, any items deferred or withdrawn?
No, sir. Nothing withdrawn nor deferred.
Item number 6, bond plat extensions. Item A, Creeks Bend, Section 1, bond extension for 1 year. Dale?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. They've asked for an extension based, they're not ready to turn it over to the Highway Department based because of slow sales, and we recommend approval for an extension for 1 year.
Usual question, is this the first time?
This is the second time, I believe, with this one.
Have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 7, waiver request. Item A, Warren Rather and Chris Rather. Item 12-4006 are requesting a waiver from the distance requirements for fire hydrants for subdivision lots for property located on Rhodes Lane.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located along Rhodes Lane off of Canesville Pike. The existing property is approximately 6.5 acres in size. The applicant's proposing to divide about 1.3 acres on the western side of the main tract for a separate property. It would have adequate road frontage and everything, would meet our subdivision regulations with the exception of the request they're making tonight. Information from CUD indicates that there is not a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet of the property. There's also a 4-inch line along Rhodes Lane that cannot support a fire hydrant according to their information. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions or motions?
It would just be for a single-family house, yes, sir. I'm not sure if it's for a family member or not, but they're representatives of the applicant.
It is for a family member.
It is for, okay, yes, sir.
Motion. Have a motion and a second to approve. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, submitted for site plan approval. A, Johnny Spice Shop Building, item 12-3022, new construction of 1,200 square feet accessory building on .83 acres zoned services with a conditional use permit for a warehouse located at the intersection of John Bragg Highway and Floration Road. Johnny Spies applicant. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Excuse me. As you stated, this property is located at the northeast corner of John Bragg Highway and Floridan Road. This property was rezoned to services back in April of this year. The original site plan was also considered by the Planning Commission at their April 23rd meeting. The applicant operates a foundation repair business and stores his equipment on the property. No customers do come to this site. The building on the original site plan has been constructed, and the applicant simply wishes to construct a second building in order to store some of his work vehicles. We did a review of the site plan. We sent comments to the design engineer. Those comments have been addressed, and we feel it's in pretty good order, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And there should be a copy of the site plan on your tables if you've got other questions. It's in lieu of, but it doesn't take away all the landscape requirements, but it does reduce them. So that was part of the reason why they did some of that. Now on the frontage, they wouldn't be required to really put any screen on the front, where John Bragg Highway and Floridan Road are. But you can put up a privacy fence, and that reduces the amount of landscaping that you do have to put. But this doesn't really, that was taken care of on the front end on the first site plan, so nothing's really changed in that regard. So.
No problem with the electrical easement?
No, sir. I believe the Middle Tennessee Electric has signed off on the plan, and they're fine with it. I'm sorry? As far as I know, everybody seems fine with it. Yes, sir. As far as, are you talking about engineering? Yes, sir.
Yes, meets our requirement.
Motion to approve and a second. Thank you. Any questions, comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Item 9. A, for rezoning requests and public hearings. Dal Abbas. Item 12, A014, rezoning and conditional use. Location 3199 Franklin Road. The commissioner is Gary Farley. The site of the size is approximately .45 acres. Tax map 920, Group A, Parcel 17. Existing zoning is R15. Proposed zoning is for services, conditional use permit, professional office space, and beauty salon. Ms. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Chairman. The applicant is proposing to convert this existing house into an office space or a beauty salon. The use will be limited by the existing septic system on the site, which was impacted by the expansion of Franklin Road. And based on information I have, it should be able to support an office with a maximum of 8 employees or one chair hair salon, and that's just going to be the limitation on that. The property will maintain its entrance on Camden Court. The City of Murfreesboro has indicated that it has plans to place a traffic signal at this intersection in the future, and has requested that right-of-way be dedicated to facilitate that improvement in the future. The applicant did create a paved parking area before applying for rezoning, and it's unclear at this time whether it meets the dimension requirements for such parking space or the aisle width. A portion of the parking lot will likely have to be removed in order to create a buffer yard that will be required on the southern portion of the property. I'm sure you guys remember the 4 houses to the west were rezoned over the past several years. They're all used for professional office spaces, an orthodontist office, cleaning office, real estate office, insurance office. In addition, the 2 houses to the east were rezoned to services recently and were also professional office space. So it was brought to our attention that this property may have been purchased under a homeowner occupancy requirement. However, it's not within the county's jurisdiction to enforce such requirements, just making you aware. This property is located within the urban character area for the comprehensive plan, and this use would fall within that areas. Just a quick view of the property. You can see all the businesses that are surrounding it. And then this is looking into the backyard where there is a parking lot that's been constructed. And of course, Camden Court. That's the orthodontist office next door. The applicant is present, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the staff at this time? If not, I'll declare the public hearing open, and it's kind of our history and part of our process to ask the applicant to come forward, if he would, and make a statement if he so chooses. The applicant, yes. State your name and address if you would, please.
My name is Al Sarhid. My mom, she's overseas, and she's working for the United States military. And she sent me today representing her. She wants to rent this place as an office or a beauty salon. And we did a major change in the house, like shows in the picture. We
Excuse me a second. We're having a difficult time hearing you back here. Could you speak up just a little bit?
My name is Al Sarhid. I'm here on behalf of my mother, Nidal Abbas, and she's working for the United States military in Jordan. She asked me to come here because she wants to do the property on 3199 Franklin Road. She wants to rent it as an office or a beauty salon. And we did a major change to the house. We built a new parking lot. We pretty much remove all the carpet, and we make it a wooded instead, and we change the whole roof. And the electricity also, we design it to fit the office need, and also they convert the garage, and they made it like into a big office.
Thank you. Anyone here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. I see no one. I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners, we're open for business.
Elizabeth, can y'all tell me what you're talking about in this parking area there that he's already got, that he was going to have to tear that out because of why? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. You can see that's the orthodontist office next door. You see they have a privacy fence and they have some trees and shrubs. That's the type 2 buffer that's required to be in between a commercial area and a residential area. And if you look at where they're, it's kind of hard to see here, but it's almost right up on the property line. So, we'll have to have a site plan submitted. That would be the next step after rezoning if it was approved. A site plan would be the next step, but I'm just guessing that they probably do not have the sufficient amount of space to put in the privacy fence and the bushes that would be required as a buffer. Answers. It was in the staff report that was mailed to them.
And I'll say, as Mr. Sandler, if I could add to that, after the last meeting, the applicant came up to our office, and it seems like that was part of the discussion we had as well, that there would have to be some modifications to the lot made because these improvements that were done were done without the knowledge or approval of staff. So.
Agreeable?
Well, he'll have to do it regardless if it's approved. So.
Seem agreeable.
What's that?
Did he seem agreeable?
He didn't seem argumentative, no, sir.
Okay.
And then, Doug, how's that going to affect the parking? Was that going to reduce the amount of parking they have?
Well, it's difficult to say, as Ms. Emsley stated during her introductory comments. We don't have any kind of a measurement or anything as to what's actually out there or how the spaces were marked. It looks, what they did, the work looks fairly professional. but we don't know if the aisle widths are adequate based on our regulations, if the size of the stalls are adequate or not. I would imagine that there had to be some sort of restriping done after the concrete that was placed was removed, but at this point, it's difficult to say if he's going to have enough or if he's not going to have enough parking. At this point, we just don't know. And part of it too, I think, will determine that will be what kind of use. If it's just an office, that's one requirement. If they end up doing some sort of a salon or some sort, there's a little bit of a different requirement for that. So a lot of it will just depend on what ends up happening with the property. So we'll have to see a site plan for that.
Chairman, I'll make a motion we approve it.
Have a motion to approve. A second?
On all conditions.
Okay, based on all conditions. And a second. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this rezoning request will be heard in December for the County Commission, and I believe that date is Thursday the 13th.
I think that's correct, yes, sir.
6:30 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Item 9B, Lucas Nemeth. Item 12A, 015, rezoning and conditional use, location 2887 Barfield Road. The commissioner is again Gary Farley. Site of the size is approximately 6 acres. Tax map 124, parcel 15. Existing zoning is R15. Proposed zoning is services. Proposed conditional use permit, general retail trade, general personal services, food services, and professional office space. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yes, you'll remember this application as well. It was also deferred at last month's meeting. The applicant has actually provided a new booklet, which should be in front of you, proposed commercial zones. Does everyone have that? Okay. The potential uses for this property, of course, are a convenience store and gas station on the corner, and then another portion of the property would use for professional office spaces, retail stores, maybe a bike shop, maybe a restaurant. There's various uses he's proposing for the property. The property was actually considered for rezoning back in 2005, a very similar request. However, that application was eventually withdrawn due to the fact that the city was in the process of acquiring right-of-way for Veterans Parkway. So they decided it wasn't a good time for it, but now they've come back through. Speaking of the road network, it actually has changed fairly dramatically in the last few months. Oh, that's just the concept plan the applicant's proposing. You can see that Veterans Parkway has now come through there, which making this is a corner lot. Barfield Crescent Road has been realigned, so that has been changed the area quite a bit. In addition to the road changing, the greenway is also going to be extended through this property in the future. This is a map provided by the City of Murfreesboro showing the corner of the property that will be taken for greenway use, and the city has indicated that they are in negotiations for acquiring that right away and that this rezoning would have no impact on that whatsoever. The comprehensive plan shows this property is being located within the Barfield Rural Center. Rural centers are intended to permit a compatible mixture of residential, institutional, and commercial uses within a neighborhood setting. So you'd want a development that's compatible with the surrounding buildings and fits in well with the neighborhood. With that being said, we'll just take a look at the property, which is, of course, currently mostly vacant now. And if you haven't been out there, you can see Veterans Parkway, brand new road. And this is just looking down Barfield Road and back into the property again. And the applicant is present, and I'm sure he'll want to discuss the proposal he's brought before you tonight a little bit more, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
At this time, any questions for staff? If not, I'll declare the public hearing open, and at this time, we'd like to hear from Mr. Nemeth.
I'm Luke Namath of 2696 Barfield Road, Murfreesboro. And this got deferred last month, and I was asked to provide more detail. And so I've provided more detail along with some photos of commercial businesses that are within the local, relatively local area from where I'm proposing to have this property rezoned. And I've put a description on those buildings to show what the exterior material is. Three of them are split-face block. They all look pretty different, but split-face block can look pretty different. Some of it even looks like brick. And then the fourth one is brick. I'm proposing to have any exterior surfaces facing the road to be masonry, including the corner of Barfield Road and Veterans Parkway. The other buildings would just face Veterans Parkway.
Any questions? I'm proposing the front and the side, and anything you see from any road, yeah. So, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's our plan.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If I could just remind the commissioners to use the microphones, because if you don't, they'll have a hard time picking you up on camera. Thank you. Sorry.
On the number 4 lot, is that primarily going to be used for the greenway or
That's our
for
plan.
businesses for there?
That's our plan, is to come up with a business that is compatible with the location there of the greenway, the future greenway, whenever they put that in.
Questions? Mike?
Thank you. Looking at the handout in front of us on the or the comprehensive plan, the last statement there basically says that in addition, the buildings will need to be attractive from the view of the future greenway at the rear of the property. Are you suggesting that the buildings or the lots 1, 2, and 3 need to be have some aesthetic eye value? Because I'm not sure here where the greenway goes on 4, or would a fence or some kind of a buffer? You see where I'm at, Doug?
I do now. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's right above the infrastructure paragraph, that last line.
Could you repeat part of that, the last part of that quote, Mr.
Yeah,
Cooch?
the paragraph starts with, yes, this proposal would be within the recommended use of Barfield Rural. And then the last line of that little paragraph says, in addition, the buildings will need to be attractive from the view of the future greenway at the rear of the property.
Right, okay.
So my question is, are we also asking him on the backs of, what do you call it, lot or building 1, 2, and 3, that also have some aesthetic value to it, or could he put a buffer tree row?
Well,
what needs to happen there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could handle it a couple different ways. If he's trying to cater to the people who are on the greenway, I don't think necessarily that buffering or putting up a fence would be the best option there. But I think that there are ways that they can design the lot and the buildings on the lot to accommodate the people from the greenway, but yet still remain attractive to them. That could be through just the facade treatments, those kind of things, nice landscaping, maybe not necessarily buffering, but nice landscaping around those areas. But, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that we're coming out saying they have to do A, B, and C. I think part of that comment was just saying that they need to be mindful that, this is an area where people will be able to come through the property, if you will, so they want to put their best face forward, so to speak.
Okay, let me ask you, on this page in the handout that shows the driveways in blue there, I'm assuming that those, the lots numbered 1, 2, and 3, and if those were commercial buildings at some point in time, I would assume that the back of those would be where your dumpsters would be, any, grease traps, anything like that.
Back of house kind of things, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I guess in my head, I'm trying to figure out, how do you mask that from the greenway?
Well, those kind of things can be taken care of through, just fence screening and around the enclosure.
Okay.
Maybe a nice, even a brick block enclosure for the dumpster, back of house kind of areas, like you said, for grease traps, that kind of thing. Of course, a lot of it too will depend on the kind of businesses he has there. It could just be simply that they have a kind of business that doesn't really need a dumpster or anything like that. It could just use one of the, just a refuse can that gets, that they contract out for private disposal. But but those are the kind of issue I think we were talking about, is we want to be sensitive to the fact that you're going to have the greenway back there, and if they're wanting to cater to that crowd, which is kind of what they've indicated to us, that I think that they're mindful of that, and that they'll take care to make sure that they don't do something back there that would decrease the attractiveness of the greenway.
Kind of what they're going for there? Okay, and you don't have a problem with that? Okay.
And keep in mind, too, what the proposal that they're showing on that lot layout, they're not really bound by that layout. That's just, I think we all understand that. They could get one user that wants to buy the whole property, and that would be fine as far as we're concerned. This is just a potential layout.
They come with a site plan, then we'll have adequate.
You'll still have to see the site plan, yes, sir.
And we can address landscaping, buffering, and all that at
yes,
that
sir.
time.
You can certainly do that.
Would be appropriate.
Yes, sir, it would be.
Doug,
yes, sir.
On your staff recommendations here, it says, due to the location of the greenway, the city of Murfreesboro would like to be involved in the site plan review phase. So if I were the applicant, I would have some question about that, as far as how far is the city then going to take me compared to what Rutherford County's, as far as what part will they play?
Well, I believe they've just asked for the ability to look at the site plans. Now, this will not be served with city sewer, so they really have no control over any approvals. They can't subject anything to any approval or any city approval or anything like that. They can make recommendations to us, and we can relay them to staff. But obviously, if they're not within the scope of our regulations, we can't require anything that the city may require that we don't. So they may make suggestions. Again, we can pass it on to the applicant and see if we can't work on a solution that would be acceptable to all parties. But as far as approval by the city or anything like that, we will not be submitting this for their planning commission approval. They would have no jurisdiction over that.
With the greenway coming through there, then this would be a suggestion from the city's part then? Correct.
It would just be recommendations by the city. They would have no binding effect on the property because, again, they're not on city sewer. So, and this is within the county's jurisdiction and has not been annexed.
The applicants, y'all understand that and agree with that? Okay.
Questions for Mr. Nemeth? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for or against this rezoning request? Evening.
My name is Austin James. I live at 2867 Barfield Road, and I brought some pictures along because my wife and I, the only problem we had with this was a lot of lights, late at night if it's going to be a store and a gas station. So I went and took some pictures of some gas stations, and it was nice to see, even out at Blackman, that they put up a little buffer between the road and the parking area of the gas station with lawn and landscaping and bushes and that. And there you can see a little bit higher. And then I have another picture. I'm sorry, I wasn't talking in here. Another picture out at Manson Pike. And there it's really nice landscaping, and I thought, well, gosh, if they do that with the proposed building that's right across the road from me, and they put in bushes, and like my truck headlights are 3 feet tall, and so a bush that's 3 or 3.5 feet tall will really knock out any problem with lights coming over into our property. And it's also nice to see, and I don't know if these are regulations or not, the price sign is you know, kind of it's low, it's not real bright, and if that's I would like to see that too if a gas station goes in. And then the very last picture we noticed when we went out to Cason Lane, where they have a gas station right in a residential area. There's Cason Lane. Now again, the bushes are low, but the sign is low, and I like that. I don't know what the codes are, but I think that would be nice for whatever they propose here. And then we went back at nighttime to see what the lights were like, and there you can see the down facing lights, even under the gas pumps. You know, they're not that obtrusive. The brightest lights are coming out of the store itself, and I figured, well, that'd be an easy fix. I could just put a piece of film up along the glass, kind of knock that down, and then that way the commercial property is over there. He has a viable business, and our residential area isn't intruded on by a bunch of lights late at night. So I would ask you all to consider that. I've talked to Luke about it. He seems agreeable to it, and that's what I wanted to let you all know. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jakes. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to speak for or against?
Planning Commission members, Gary Farley. I'm the County Commissioner in the area. After you all had your meeting back last month, I was at home watching it on TV, watching what was going on, and Lucas, I think, gave me a call a few days after that and asked me what I thought about the situation, and I explained to him my feelings, that if it did get passed, that I wanted brick. I wanted also to make sure that the neighbors were protected. That the neighbors were my first concern. I've received a call from the neighbors right across the street, and we talked about some things he could do. He actually went out and looked at and done some things and took some pictures. I also asked Lucas if he would. I didn't get a chance to see the proposal. I was out of town one weekend, and he hadn't had a chance to get the pictures done. So I just, about 2 minutes before the meeting started, I was able to look at those, and I've seen what's on the board tonight. I mean, I don't have a problem with commercial business. You know, when Veterans Parkway come on board, and I think you got a 5-lane road. We know anytime 5-lane roads come around, there's going to be commercial business that's going to come around. What I want to be done in the residential area is I want the traffic, you know, situation to be looked at to make sure that the egress and stuff they're not intruding on the neighbors. I want to make sure the light pollution is not being intruded on the neighbors. They made a lot of good comments on things that they asked him for as far as the buffering, the landscaping. They made some the height of the sign, if it's a gas station. What I'm asking you to do tonight is, if you approve this, I want when the site plan comes around, to put in there where the neighbors are going to be protected. The one really concern I've got also is, I served 4 years on the Planning Commission with you all, and I don't remember a time, and I could be wrong, stand to be corrected, I don't remember a time. Usually these come in here as a planned development, not really just a carte blanche type rezoning.
Generally speaking, you're correct. There were, even my time here, I can think of just a couple, but generally speaking, usually there's a little more of a plan than what we're seeing, but I can think of a few that weren't. So.
Approve it without a plan. What I want to make sure is, again, that the neighbors are being protected. And how do we do that?
Well, I think under these regulations that we're under now, I think you've got some leeway as far as the protections you may prescribe on the properties, considering the comments we've heard tonight as far as light spillover, seeing what's called a photometric plan, basically a lighting plan, so we can make sure that it's minimal light spillover to the surrounding properties. Considering especially the corner lot, if it does develop as some sort of a convenience market gas station, we expressed our concerns with the applicant this morning when he came up about the possibility of putting the canopy and the pumps and facing everything toward Veterans Parkway as opposed to Barfield Road, and he said basically that was what they were planning on anyway. Although those pictures that were taken from the front of the building, front of the building facing in, and that's where the canopies were, that's where the windows were to the building. If those are facing out toward Veterans Parkway, I think that would cut down a lot of the possible light spillover you would see on adjacent property. As far as lights are concerned, there's always the ability to use box-type fixtures, lighting fixtures that basically focus the light down on the ground, as opposed to just being an open fixture, no fixture at all, just having light spill out in all directions. That's a possibility, and that's something that we typically do see in those type of developments. Good landscaping, as the gentleman said. Now, some of those pictures he did show, especially the one on Medical Center Parkway, of course, that is in the city of Murfreesboro's limits, and that is within their Gateway Design Overlay District, so they have a heightened requirement for landscaping. Our requirements wouldn't come anywhere near that. But
this is a rezoning,
right.
and the Planning Commission can actually...
Under the conditional use permit, they can require maybe some additional landscaping, just, again, in concert maybe with the photometric plan, just to show that there won't be as much light spillover onto adjacent properties. And I think a lot of that could be alleviated by just focusing everything on the Veterans Parkway side and not so much on the Barfield Road side.
So if the motion tonight was to approve this, in that motion, could it be put in there about making sure it faces Veterans Parkway, and making sure that the lights are down and the buffering is a certain height to make sure that...
Yes, I think you could. I think you could structure it in such a way that it would get the desired intent across. I think the applicant he's present. He understands what we're going for, and I think that in their design of the site, when they get to that point, that they'll be sensitive to that. And again, the Planning Commission will get another crack at that at the Planning Commission meeting when they review the site plan. But I think you could put something in there. Lighting plan required, the box type fixtures that point the light down. So we can that'll help us to review better how much light spillover we're actually seeing on the property. You're not going to be able to get rid of all of it, but you can minimize it at least.
I think the neighbors, with it being put in the motion, and I know when the site plan comes around, things could, if it's not in there in the original motion, things could change later on, and I think they would be more comfortable with it. I would be more comfortable with it if it was in the motion tonight. If this was the motion to approve, that would reflect that.
That'll be up to the commission, but yeah, I think that could be done tonight. Yes, sir.
Y'all got any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farley. We appreciate your presence tonight. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning proposal? I see no one. I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners, need a motion.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure can, Richie, sorry.
Do we have a light spillover foot candle? Like I think the city is, it's either a half foot candle or nothing at the property line.
Right. Currently, we don't have anything like that. Under our new regulations, there will be something in there. Now, the number escapes me off the top of my head, but in our current regulations, we don't. But you could always limit it to 1 foot candle, half foot candle, something like that. Maybe even one, I think, seems to be that's the standard, I
Hardly
Okay,
be
well,
half.
a half, okay, then that would be, if you want to do that, that'd be fine.
Comments?
On our sign regulations now, would he be required to do like the ground monument because of where this is at, or would he be able to have a pole sign, or what's that going to look like?
He, under our current requirements, and quite frankly, our new requirements are fairly standard. As far as, we pretty much just copied that right over to the new regulations. We didn't really change that much. In commercial zones, he would be allowed one ground sign, which could be a maximum of 50 square feet. If he has multiple tenants on the property, he could go up to 100. The height shall not exceed 10 feet. He could have internal or external illumination. He would be allowed a certain amount of changeable copy, be that automatic changeable copy or manual, which would be the digital signs would be the automatic. But it would just be, it wouldn't be like moving pictures and things like that. It could, like the gas station prices or something like that, you could do.
Did I only hear you mention ground signs?
Yes, that was the ground sign, which could be a pole sign as well. But
have-
because
he
it
could
could
have a pole
be, yeah, it doesn't really specify in here, but it could be no higher than 10 feet. So that'd be as high as it could go.
Like last month when we talked about this too, we asked for clarification. This is a rezoning for services, but because of our current, the way our current regulation is written, it's also for a conditional use permit.
Right.
So even though we can't put conditions on the rezoning, we can put conditions on the conditional use permit.
That is correct.
And that's where the masonry and all that would come in.
That is correct. And if the new regulations are approved, any conditional use permits that are active will continue to be regulated under the new code, under those conditions. We've put that in the ordinance, the new ordinance. Just a little more information about the signage too, not to give you overkill or anything, but they are entitled to a little bit more signage than just that. They could do a certain amount of wall signage. Also, they could do if they had a gas canopy, they could do some signage on the canopy itself. Not just a whole lot, but there are some provisions for those types of signs as well. I didn't want anyone to think that that was the only sign that they would be permitted to have under our regulations. So.
Basically, they're going to be able to do the signage that they're showing and he's showing in his packet on the pictures. So basically, it's
yeah, well, without knowing
something very similar. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Without knowing the sizes, it's difficult to say.
Right.
But
Right.
those similar types of signs.
What the neighbor was showing in the Manson Pike and Florence Road BP station there, that's commercial, local in the city of Murfreesboro. So they had to confine to commercial local signage right there compared to what we're allowing, which is a lot smaller. It's more confined. And then the Blackman Grocery is the county. It's still county.
That's correct.
So, and they basically they just chose to do it that small. So they could have went larger, but they just in the residential area, not that picture, but the Blackman picture, they chose to because it's county. That's still city right there. That's St. Andrews, by the way.
Right, yeah, I think that one he was saying, Case and Lane, I think that's at the corner of
Case and Lane,
Trail.
one case is St. Andrews, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're correct. And I know where, I'm pretty sure I know where that one, I live
Yeah, and
right
then the
out
Blackman
area,
there,
so-
that's St. Andrews again. But anyway.
Right.
Well, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we approve with the conditions that's been placed forth.
Conditions of staff?
Staff.
Plus does that include the lighting and the signage?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Enhanced lighting and signage? Okay. Thank you, Steve.
We're going to have more of a hand in that after a plan has been submitted, but if we need to do it at this point, I don't mind putting that into this approval as far as the lighting being faced, the downward lighting, and what else did y'all?
They were limiting the foot candle, and I don't know about the 10 on the windows if we want to do that.
I think we'll handle that through the actual process of whenever they put a plan in place.
You also want to put the masonry requirements that the applicant's proposing?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And the applicant is saying they're going to do that anyway. This just puts it in black and white.
Need a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. I'd like to thank the applicant and staff and the commission for all working to get this project accomplished, and it should be an asset to the community if we can pull all these factors together and make it happen. Thank you. Staff report. I think Doug's got we've got a training session here in a little bit, but Doug's got a proposal for us for our 12/13, I think it's 12/13 meeting, is that right?
I think it's the 10th, isn't it?
I might be wrong about that. No, it's not, it's 12 something.
But, I mean, I don't have my calendar
Our
right in
next
front of me,
6 p.m. meeting is scheduled for the 10th. And Doug has a proposal for us.
Well,
I think it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, this is just something I wanted to kind of throw by you to see what kind of response you might get. As Mr. Phillips said, our next night meeting would be December the 10th. Of course, a few years ago, we decided to just have the one meeting in December because of the holidays and everything, and that's worked out fine. In light of the County Commission meeting this coming Thursday, where they'll be considering the new regulations for the zoning, in the event that those are approved, where our recommendation from staff is going to be that they take effect come January the 1st. So they wouldn't take effect immediately. The reason for that is, of course, we have the couple zonings that we were discussing tonight. So we wanted to allow them to work through the process under the regs which they were submitted under. So that would give us the December County Commission meeting to still do that. If the regulations are approved on Thursday, we're not going to take any more rezoning applications until after the first of the year, because the issue we were running into is how do you process one under one regulation and then the regulations change? Do you continue? How that would just be kind of awkward. So we've decided to, if they are approved, to just do that, make it effective January the 1st and take no more zoning applications. If that is indeed what happens, then there will be no rezoning applications to consider for the December 10th meeting. So generally we have rezonings in an evening meeting and we do our plats and plans during the daytime. So what our idea is that maybe we think about the possibility of making that December 10th meeting a 9 a.m. meeting as opposed to an evening meeting. Now, on top of that, that's usually the day where we have our holiday dinner prior to the meeting. And what our thought is rather than do a holiday dinner in the evening, have the daytime meeting and then maybe do a brunch afterward. So, and then we could just combine that with we typically have an office get together ourselves, and we could just kind of lump that all into one big event, if you will. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on it. Of course, this all hinges on whether or not the regulations are adopted on Thursday. If they're not, then it'll just be business as usual if we get any zoning applications, and if we don't, we'll kind of go back from there. But I just kind of wanted to get your take on that, see if in the event that they are approved, to see. Yeah, and we'd be over in the mezzanine. That's correct. We wouldn't be in this room. We'd be in the mezzanine at that point. So we were thinking that, that would save an evening, especially around the holidays. Things start getting kind of crazy, I know, in my house, and I'm sure in everybody else's. Thought it'd be nice to maybe give you one of your evenings back. So.
Doug, how would that work in terms of advertising the meeting? Will that give you enough time? Because don't we have a certain timeline we have to follow in terms of advertising the meetings?
Well, as far as we would just follow our normal protocols that we do, and that meeting we would have plenty of time to advertise for that, especially with no rezonings or anything. It would just be plats and plans. We would just do the notice at the beginning of the month like we typically do for just that one meeting. So. I don't think any motions in order are needed or anything. If you're all okay with that, that's what we'll shoot for. And when we find out what happens after Thursday, we'll send you an email and let you know. We'll have another meeting even before that anyway. So we'll be able to kind of keep you in the know as to what's going on.
All right, pencil that in just in case. I think it's a pretty good idea. If we can make it at 9 instead of 6 p.m. on the 10th. Any other business or staff reports?
I have nothing, sir.
Commissioners would bear with us. We have a scheduled training tonight, and if I'm not mistaken, Eric is going to do that training, and it's something that we've been excited about and looking forward to it for weeks, and we really appreciate you spending your evening with us, Eric, to do that. At this point, our business is really concluded, and this commission will just be in a training session from this point forward. Thank you.
Excited. This is exhilarating material, I know. I'm Eric Hill, and I'll go through traffic studies. I know over the last several years, every couple months, it seems like traffic studies come up, turn lanes, different things like that. And so just an attempt to try and educate as much as possible. I'm going to go through kind of the basics on this stuff, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me, and we'll start off. This first part, I'm going to go over traffic impact studies, and this is based on our new or our proposed zoning regs. And this will be, if the zoning regs get passed, this will be what happens and how our process will be for traffic impact studies. The purpose of a traffic impact study is to determine the need for any improvements to the adjacent and nearby transportation system in order to maintain a satisfactory level of service, an acceptable level of safety, and to provide appropriate access to a proposed development. Basically what that means in layman's terms is we're going to figure out if we need to do something or not, or if the current infrastructure is going to work. So we've got, in our new regs, there's 3 different situations where we'll look at to see if we require a traffic study. And I'm going to use some numbers tonight, and the quiz at the end won't be too bad. So I'm joking. All these numbers come out of technical manuals, and I forget them. It's not something that's it's something, and these numbers could change. So I mean, and I'll try to explain as much as possible. So I hope it makes sense. And if not, say something. I'll try to explain better. But the first exception is when the expected number of trips generated by proposed development exceeds 100 peak hour vehicle trips per day, as defined by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which I'll call the ITE from here on out. They're just kind of the authority when it comes to transportation engineering. The second exception would be a zoning or land use change, which it's the same criteria. It's just one is for like a more like a development, and the other one's for a land use change, something like we just talked about. And then the third is kind of the catch-all, and that's if the county engineer or the planning director has specific concerns about adjacent or nearby roadways, intersections, side access, or safety issues. So the first one, the expected number of trips generated by proposed development or zoning land use, this really covers the first two, that will exceed 100 peak hour vehicle trips in a day. A peak hour vehicle trip is basically, you look at the busiest hour of the day. Most situations, it's going to be 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., most places. You're looking for 100 vehicle trips, which is a fancy word for cars. 100 cars coming through there in an hour. So 60 minutes in an hour, 100 cars, you're looking over a car and a half a minute, okay? So if we're looking at a development, and I'll get into a little bit more details right here, I'll give you a couple examples. Residential example. The ITE, for 50 years now, they've been coming up with this trip generation manual where they look at, all they do is look at different developments and different land uses and what kind of traffic they create. And that's what they do, is try to get the best estimate possible. And they say that 1.01 trips are generated per single-family residential home. So as a hard and fast rule, you can say for pretty much 100 lot subdivision, you're going to create 100 more cars, just as looking at simple terms. So by our new zoning regs, there's exceptions to every rule, but just as a general rule, you could say that for every 100 lot subdivision, we're going to make them do a traffic study. Industrial. The ITE defines general light industrial generates 0.97 trips per 1,000 square feet of building. So an example, a light industrial use of 104,000 square feet, which is a football field times a football field from goalpost to goalpost. if we had a building come in, a warehouse or something that was a light industrial use, then we would look at a traffic study. And these numbers, like I said earlier, they come from the trip generation manual. The other exception to that is, like, if you look at a big box store, like, you know, all these big box stores, if they've got 100 locations, they know how many cars they're going to produce. I mean, they keep up with that data, and that's how they come up with their parking numbers and all their stuff. And so their data means more than the trip generation manual. Now, if there's a big difference between them, that's where we'd look at a study to determine it. But a lot of your big stores have that data, and so that's pretty important. That's where we trust the developer on that. Yes, this would all be on the developer's dime. Yes.
I want to jump in and ask you a question. One of the problems that it seems like we've had in the past is when developments have already been approved, and now development number 2 or number 3 is coming in, and development number 1's not complete yet. So, like, for example, the Epps Mill Road, we know we've continued to approve things out there, and so if we were to do a traffic study, development 1's not done. And so we made decisions based off of development 1's traffic, now 2, now 3, but 1's not done yet. So is there any way to factor that in, or can you just work with the numbers that you have that day, and there's no way to do any forecasting? Or
you could do forecasting. And in a minute, I'm going to get into kind of what a traffic impact study is, and it'll touch on that a little bit. But that would be the job of the person that does the traffic studies, to try to estimate as well as possible. And then as staff, that's our job too, to try to, you know, and we talked about this scenario before. The guy comes in with a 99 lot subdivision, and he's got one tie-in, and it's in a curve. That's where that number 3 comes in, where the county engineer or planning director have the discretion to maybe request one. So there's some leeway in there, but I think forecasting is important, and that'll come into the traffic impact study. We'll look at that in just a second. And this is what this is. And this is, I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but this is, if a traffic engineer was going to do an impact study for something, they would look at this outline. And I just want to give you an idea of what we're talking about on an impact study. We're not talking about Bubba sitting in his car out there with a stopwatch and a counter counting cars that come by. I mean, it's a very detailed, very detailed thing. And let me say this too: we may not see this much detail, but this is what the impact study really does. Now, what we see, the finished product, may be a lot more cleaned up, a couple pages, something a little bit easier for everyone to comprehend. So, just as an outline of what this thing would go through, it would have an introduction, a summary, kind of a purpose statement. Your executive summary would not just go through the site itself; it would also go through, location and the surrounding properties. It'd look at the proposed development, site and nearby, any off-site development that would, like Rhonda just talked about. That, we're not just looking at this one; we're also looking at the surrounding properties in a maybe a little node, we'll say. And then it would go through the descriptions, land use, location, site plan, zoning, phasing and timing, which would actually be more toward lights, which is looking more urban than we typically see. And then you're going into the conditions, which is the study area, the area of influence, the conditions, the current land use and zoning, and anticipated future development, which goes back into that, Rhonda. The conditions, the accessibility, the existing roadway system, the future roadway system. We would expect them to take into account the long-range transportation plan, things that we know are in the future going to come up. I mean, all this is supposed to go into this study. Volumes, conditions, transit service, which, we used to not have to worry about, but now with the rover, with the city doing the rover, some of that stuff, I don't know that they go outside the city, but that stuff, if it comes close, it comes into this, because you start dealing with more pedestrians and different kinds of traffic. And then, of course, the existing relevant transportation system management programs, and that would be like, that's kind of like, for us, would be our long-range transportation plan. The city would probably have something a little bit more technical, but for us, it would be that. Projected traffic, and this is each horizon year. In an attempt to forecast, you can kind of look long-term. We know that as communities grow, that we're going to get more traffic, and so they kind of look in the future. What are we looking at? Kind of like our long-range transportation plan looks at 15, 20 years out. Well, an impact study really it needs to look into the future a little bit. chip generation, distribution, modal split, which I actually had to look up. I didn't even know what that meant. And that is like the difference between cars, trucks, bicycles. I mean, you know, when we think about a rural community, like we partially are, you think about cars. But the closer you get into a town, a lot of pedestrians, a lot of bicycles, a lot of the Rover. I mean, these different modes, and so that's a big deal these days. And then we go into the projected traffic and total traffic, and then you start all of this, and now we're just getting into the analysis part, the site access, the capacity and the level of service, which is just a pretty black and white technical thing where you can look at any road, look at the traffic, the volume, and you can determine the level of service, A, B, C, D, E on a road. And so this will kind of say, okay, this is what we've got now. And then they'll go through an improvement analysis. They're saying, okay, this is what, to accommodate what we want to build here, this is what I think we should do. You know, we could do, whether it be a widening, a stop sign, a red light, additional lanes, alternative improvements, evaluation. And then they get into the actual findings. And then the recommendations of kind of the major summary. Here's what all we want to do. So all that to say, it's a pretty good document. I mean, we're not talking about just I think it's going to be okay. I mean, we're looking at a pretty detailed technical document here. And then at the end, they're suggesting all kind of tables and figures, maps, and different things. So what do we do when we get this thing? You know, some engineer stamps this thing and lays it in front of us. What do we do with it? And basically, the engineer, what this impact study will do, we're kind of putting the liability on them. Instead of us trying to decide whether we think it's appropriate or not for there to be a turn lane or a signal or a stop sign, this engineer is going to say, this is what I think we should do improvement-wise to make the traffic as safe as possible for this development. And it should be pretty black and white. I mean, they're going to look at it as technical as possible. That doesn't mean there's going to be some gray area, because there's always going to be those areas. But for the most part, I think this, from a liability standpoint, should be good for us.
Okay, the traffic study is being done on the developer's dime.
Yes.
So he's hired this engineer.
Yes.
Are traffic studies, are they standard? So, like, for example, I know if I order a professional real estate appraisal, there are certain things that absolutely have to be in that document for it to be a valid appraisal. Is that how it is for traffic studies? Is there, among engineers, is there a template that says all the following things have to be in there and it has to be treated objectively? Because I guess my concern is if I'm working for the developer and I know what he wants this report to say,
right.
You know, sure. And I understand there's credibility online and all that, but if there's, and will there be different types of studies? You know, is somebody going to come in here and do what I call a traffic study light and not do all of this? And do we need a full-blown this on everything? I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Well, that outline I just went through, I think is a general term. I don't think there's a standard. I don't think there's a checklist for an impact study, because I think every engineer is going to be different. What I just went through is a pretty general outline, though, and I think they're going to follow it. And I think our job as staff is, when we get that in, to make sure that it's not biased and to compare it toward, kind of look at the standards somewhat and look at their report and what they're, you know, if they leave out a really big, you know, section in that outline, we probably want to look at that a little closer.
I'll make a comment on that. I think what we can do in the office, we've got checklists for a lot of things we do. We can actually come up with a checklist, what we want to see in these traffic studies, and give it to the people we ask them to do it. What that'll do is take some of the guesswork off of them. As an example, when you get into projecting traffic, and if the new regulations go into place, and you have a piece of property zoned X, whatever, there's certain uses that can go on that piece of property in that zoning. So in a case where they're trying to project future traffic, we can just tell them, consider the worst case of these uses that are already can go in there, and then figure their traffic generation from that in addition to. Also, these numbers, 100 trips and what are in addition to what's going on there already. That before you put the existence or the responsibility for whatever traffic control implementation you're trying to go up there. But I think the checklist idea will take some of the guesswork out of, because you are right, you will, and as Eric has indicated, this is a general outline, but you will get a lot of variations on that. And so what we'll say is, all right, the minimum we want is X. You follow this. If you don't give us this information, then we can tell you we don't respect your study, or we can tell you you got to go back and redo it or whatever, because they'll charge them X amount of money to do those studies.
Well, and then one of the concerns that I guess I have that we've run into in the past is that it's not always just trip generation. Sometimes there are curves, there's sight distance, there's things like that maybe, it's anecdotal. People come up and say, we need this or that. I know there was one pedestal at Dollar General that recently, you had concerns about that where we had approved it and we didn't require the turn lane.
I wanted to bring that part up. That if you look at the third condition, that's where it gives either the county engineer or the planning director or the planning commission, if you so want it, an option to require it over and above the number generation due to the curves or a safety problem that you've seen or heard of, so you can address those types of things. What you want to do, I don't think you'd want in every situation come up, well, we have an exception, we want to do this, because you're wasting the validity of what you're trying to do. What we're trying to do is set a methodology in place so that when it comes up, you've got a number, if you will, to work with, whether it be 100 trips or 98 trips or 92 trips or whatever. But if every time one of them comes up, you say, well, there's a hill, 200 feet down the road, or there's a curve here, it would behoove the commission to say at that point, even though we don't feel the numbers generate, we want some type of traffic deal there because of the safety thing, and not cause the developer or the other people go through the expense of doing the thing. I think doing the studies to a certain level based on our checklist will give us the validity and be consistent throughout all the cases that you handle in all situations.
Well, I think you definitely need to include in there the safety feature, and you can give us whatever criteria you think belongs there. But I know, especially because we're talking about development in a rural area, there's many times it's not going to hit that 100-car number. I mean, so then all of a sudden we're saying one's never required, when we know that there are safety issues out there.
That's where, like Dale said, that third caveat will catch that. That's where we'll look at that. And one thing too, we mentioned a few times this being on the developer's dime. The best way I know to really compare it, I guess, would be like in the past where maybe a development's come in and we've made a developer study a box culvert, let's say, something downstream, some infrastructure downstream that we've got them to look at to determine if it needed to be upsided. This would be similar to that. It's okay, they meet the threshold or for safety reasons or volume, whichever one, and so we would request that they also present that as part of their package. Well, and that's probably a Josh question, but he and I have talked about this stuff before, and from what I understand, I know we have some leeway in front of the development itself. I mean, that portion in front of the development, yeah. But from what I understand, I don't think we have a lot of responsibility way down the road. Now that's just something from what we could make someone do, but. At that point, you would hope that it would be a situation where they wouldn't want to develop off of inferior infrastructure. To a point, I think so. That's really all I had on impact studies. It's in our new zoning regs, and it's something we've talked about it for years, and but we've never really done anything major with it. I think it's a good thing, and if assuming the zoning regs go through, I think it'll be a good change and give us something a little bit more a system, kind of like Dale talked about, to really analyze this stuff.
You know about how much a traffic study costs?
It would vary. It would really vary on what kind of range, and the volumes you're talking about. I know we do some small, just some counts and volume analysis in our office, and I know from a time standpoint it's very time consuming, to go out and to install the tubes, and it probably don't look like much, but when you got a couple guys on the road and you're doing traffic control, and I could say they would amount a lot, but I really don't know how much. The next thing I wanted to go through was traffic signals. And I know we don't have many traffic signals in our county, but often, I'm sure you guys hear just like I do, every time there's an intersection that's busy, everybody wants to put a traffic signal there. So I thought you guys might like to know what actually goes in to getting a traffic signal put in. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the approvals and stuff, but as far as the warrant portion of it, why is there a red light at this intersection and there's not at another one? There are 9 warrants for a traffic signal. And when I'm talking warrants, I'm not talking about the one that Sheriff Arnold brings to your house. I'm talking about a warrant is basically you're looking at design criteria, and it has to meet at least one of these things, one of these 9 things, in order to justify a traffic signal. There's also some, this comes out of the MUTCD, which is the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's used nationally. It's basically the same book that says a stop sign has to be an octagon and it has to be red. We do that so that it's uniform, and so it's in our minds, and you know what a stop sign is. You don't have to read it. So this is a national thing. Okay, I'll go through these 9 things here. There's also language in the MUTCD, not just these 9 things. It kind of gets to the little bit of a gray area. Even if it meets one of these 9 warrants, it doesn't always mean that you have to put a light in. There's some other caveats, and sometimes it's not just as simple as okay, it has so many cars and you put a light in. So I just kind of want to preface that. So intersection lingo here. When we're talking about these intersections, we're going to be talking about a major road and a minor road. And the easiest example I could think about would be like Broad Street and Thompson. Okay, I'll probably use that in examples. Broad Street being the major road and Thompson being the minor. Okay, the first warrant, and this is probably the most common one, is the 8-hour vehicular volume warrant. This is just for like a generally highly congested area. And what it basically says is when certain traffic volumes are present for 8 hours in a day, not 6, but at least 8, then this warrant would be met, for example. And there's actually 2 different caveats. One is a minimum vehicular volume. And so we're going to say 500 cars per hour on Broad Street versus 150 cars per hour on Thompson. Now, I will say that there are extensive charts and graphs, and I picked these numbers as just kind of an example, but there's lots of different variations of this, and you'll see a touch of that. But that was kind of the minimum that I looked at, was 500 cars per hour on the major road and 150 on the minor. That's for just minimum vehicular volume. And then you look at interruption of continuous traffic, which makes me think of one of those roads where you pull up to an intersection and it's just, as far as you can see, there's just cars, just constant. There may be, there's 50 feet between them, but they're just coming. They're just constant cars, and you just can't pull out. Well, what this does, it looks at that too. So it's saying like 750 cars on the big road and 75 cars on the small road. But there's just so many cars on your major road that you got to stop it to allow cars to get out. So if that happens 8 hours in a day, so this is going to rule out your problem areas where school traffic in the morning, school traffic in the afternoon, it's not going to work. Then there's a 4-hour vehicular volume. This is usually for very heavy traffic come off the minor road onto the major road. So this is more like a Thompson and Broad, where you got a lot of cars. And if you look at 500 vehicles per hour on the major street, the minor is up to 260, where it was in the hundreds before. So they look at every different option you can think of. But this just happens to happen for 4 hours of a day. Then you have the peak hour, and I refer to this as the Nissan warrant. This is 1 hour a day. There are so many cars coming out of one intersection. We got to put a light there, and Nissan is the best example I can think of. When at shift change, they are lined up, and there's a bunch of people trying to get out, and without a light, they'd be there till the next shift change. So the example on that would be about 500 cars on your major road and 425 on your minor. So we're talking about a big influx of cars coming onto your major road, but it just has to happen for 1 hour. Those first ones are the ones that we're going to see most in reality in our type of community. Now, you get into pedestrian volume, This is almost a little bit vague. There's actually some technical stuff on this, but it's kind of hard to decipher. But basically, if we had a lot of pedestrians at an intersection for whatever reason, and they start piling up, and there's not enough sidewalk to hold everybody safely off the road, you could warrant putting in a light. Same thing with a school crossing. Basically, if a school children can't cross a road due to heavy traffic, you can justify a light. Coordinated signal system, this would be, and this isn't something we'll be dealing with really, but this is like in town, several intersections in a row, and you've got intersection A, intersection B, and intersection C is in the middle, and there's no light, and the traffic gets messed up in the middle because of these two lights. You could put a light in the middle of them just to make the system flow. And then crash experience, and I'm going to say this one very carefully because this one gets, I think, misunderstood commonly. If it says if 5 or more reported crashes that would have been prevented by a traffic signal occur within a 12-month period, each crash involving personal injury or property damage and certain minimum vehicular volumes defined in the MUTCD that must be met, and other alternatives have been tried and failed. The reason I say that carefully is because I've heard several times before people say, we had 5 wrecks in an intersection, let's put a light up. It's just not that easy to meet the warrant. I mean, but that's kind of the rule though. When you start thinking about 5 injury collisions at an intersection, that's pretty major. That's pretty major stuff. But I think that third bullet that says, their alternatives have been tried and failed, I think that's important too. I mean, it's putting up a light's not always the answer, and that's the typical public wants that. I think they think it's the answer, but it's not. It's not always the best weapon. And then the roadway network. This is for what we'd be doing. It's very similar to the coordinated signal system we talked about earlier. It's just basically because of other intersections, you would have to put a light in to control traffic. And then this one, intersection near a grade crossing. The best example I could think of this would be like Middle Tennessee at Church Street, like they're close to the co-op, where the railroad comes through there, and you've got an intersection close. And if there wasn't a red light at that intersection, you can imagine how much chaos would be with the railroad and all that stuff. And so like that, you could say that the red light there at that intersection will be warranted because of this, because it'll keep cars out of the red light, out of the railroad. And that's really it. As far as signals, I mean, you've got those 9 warrants, and you can look at those. If the language says if it meets 1 or more of those, then you're looking at being able to justify a light. But like I said earlier, there's more to it. I mean, still a traffic impact study for the whole area should be done, and there's still some analysis. Okay. Well, our office has a big part in it, and then it depends. Of course, those are state roads, and so and most of our heavy roads are state roads, and so that's a whole other issue. You have to get approval through TDOT, and TDOT they will do these warrants. Now, we would probably do some quick ones in house to see if it warranted, and if we thought it warranted, we would have to talk with TDOT. They would do a warrant thing, and then the highway department has play in that too, just from the standpoint of maintenance, or someone in the county has to look at the maintenance of it, because a red light isn't free. I mean, you gotta have power to it, and you gotta maintain it, and you gotta keep an eye on it, and keep bulbs in it, and so there is a cost associated with running them. So we currently in the county we have Walter Hill, and we have there is one more, and I cannot think where it's at. I know of
But
2.
we're responsible for the one on where the road trap from the racetrack crosses over 840. That is actually charged to the county. One at Walter Hill. There's one up off
Compton and
Las Casas Highway up where. Right. The way that works is the city's doing maintenance on those, and they bill us through my office, and the mayor has a line up budget in his to take care of the cost for that.
There's a few locations it's come up that we've been studying, probably a few more here and there. You know, I know that 231 corridor north, it's pretty busy up through the county. I know with school traffic and Cherry Lane all up through there, and so maybe some stuff up through there. But most of our busy roads are state roads, and it's like I said, the state, even though it's their road, they let us. They say that's your baby. I mean, we have to put the lights on it and pay for them. Now they have to kind of give us approval, but I don't see a major, just a handful of intersections that we would consider that. This last section here is left turn lanes on 2-lane highways, and we've talked about this more than one time. This is just our what we see typically as a turn lane. This is it, and so I'm gonna try to make this make sense. And there's some numbers involved in this. And left turn lanes they're warranted by volume analysis based on speed, number of cars in opposing lane, number of cars in the advancing lane, and the percentage of left-hand turns. And you would think that there would be lots of information about this, but this is it. This chart is basically what will let you know whether you need a turn lane or not. Now, it goes back to the discretion of the engineer. There are some different things that can go into this, but technically, as far as what's published and put out, this chart is what does it. So I've got a few examples here. Give you definitions first. The advancing volume is, let's say we're driving. We're all going this way. That's the advancing volume. That's all the cars going the way we're going. Opposing volume is everything. We're 2-lane road. Everything coming toward us. And then your left-hand turns is basically however many cars are turning left as a percentage of how many are continuing to go straight. Okay. So we're going to look at an example here. We're going to say 36 vehicles per hour turning left. So a car every 2 minutes or so turning left into a gas station, a convenience store of some kind. Let's see. It's in a day. It's in a day. You're looking at this is vehicles per hour, kind of over the course of a day. You're looking at a whole section here. But in reality, you would probably end up looking at your peak more specifically, I guess. Like for example, well, I'll go through this right here. You look at, and it all depends on your speed limit too. So we're doing a 40-mile-an-hour operating speed. And then we're looking at, let's say, we're going to go down to the 100 vehicles per hour in the opposing column. So we've got 100 vehicles per hour coming toward us. And Mike, this would be a peak hour. That's what we're looking at. And we know we have 36 cars turning left. And you kind of have to do some math on this, but in this scenario, it would work out to where we'd have 5% left-hand turns, okay? And as you can see, there's a column for 5, 10, 20, and 30%. And so basically, you're looking at the percentage of how many cars are turning left compared to how many cars are going straight. And you're comparing that to how many cars are coming toward you. And so in this scenario, you would have to have 720 cars going forward. Those are pretty big numbers. If you think about, for only 36 cars turning left, you've got to have 720 cars going forward to justify a turn lane. I mean, 720 vehicles per hour is a lot of cars. When you really get into the numbers, to me, it's kind of alarming. I would think that those numbers would be a lot less. So let's do one more. Just going up 2 vehicles per hour turning left, which I don't know. I guess I should have compared that to a gas station and looked in the trip generation manual to see what the typical trips per hour would be on that. But if we had 38 vehicles per hour turning left, and we were looking at a 40-mile-an-hour road, and 10% left turns, we're gonna say it'll be less cars going in the lane we're going. Then my computer's slow. And that would be 400 cars coming toward us. So we're talking about 380 cars going the way we're going, and we got 400 cars coming toward us. It would take 38 cars turning left in an hour to get a turn lane. And to me, that's kind of do a 38 of 380, so 10% of your cars. I guess I thought it would have been a lot less than that. You know, I mean, that's when you're looking at 380 vehicles per hour. I mean, that's a lot of cars. Yeah. And so I know that's a lot of numbers, but that's it. I mean, that's pretty much the.
I wanted to make a
40 turns an hour. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Craig, off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's a bunch. It's a bunch. Now, and you're talking about a 4-lane road. Talking about a 4-lane road. It'll change everything. It would. This is 2-lane. This is Epps Mill. That's what this is. That's kind of what I had in my head. We're talking about, you know, yeah. It's a whole nother, and it's different too because you'll typically have a median in a 4-lane. It just changes everything because you'll have a median, you'll have storage. And so what we're trying to get here is you're going from a 2-lane road. How many cars is enough that where we need to put a lane in the middle for somebody to sit there to wait to turn? And so you're not going to back cars up for a mile.
What we're trying to do is we put in the regs a methodology to do these traffic studies if we think they're warrant. You know, we had the one at Epps Mill Road, and the question came up about the turn lane, and so we did the numbers because that is a county road. We did the studies, and we went by these warrants, and there was not enough vehicles based on the warrants that the state and all the country uses on these warrants to warrant the turn lane. And I presented that to the county commission, and the question came up while I was up there to Jim Cope, do we have to honor these warrants? And of course, the answer was you have the option of doing what you want based on safety or whatever, but we're trying to develop a system so that when these projects come in, we either ask for the traffic study or we do our own. We can come back with you guys and tell you, based on the warrants that we used that have been adopted nationally, this does not justify either a turn lane or traffic signal or whatever. That does not take the option away from you or the county commission for requiring that, but it does put the responsibility on you to come up with a reason to require it versus just to say, well, common sense says I need to do it. In other words, you can say, well, there's a curve there, there's a sight distance problem, there's a hill, or we have a history of a lot of wrecks, maybe something like that. I think it's real shaky for us to put a requirement on something and say, well, we need to do it based on common sense, because a lot of times that's not very common. It's just... That's correct. And I think it's really valid. Right, you can valid because, particularly now, say on Epps Mill, because we got the industrial park there. And if it is developed, you know you're going to generate, quite a few more trips. And so that puts you a lot closer. But if you're at 30%, at that point in time, I think you need to, think about it a little bit more. It's just, we're trying to give you, we being the staff, both planning and engineering, give you more data, more information for you to make your decisions. And more justified, we require the developer to provide the information to us, which we will check against the standards that we set for these studies.
It's in the AASHTO book. I couldn't tell you. I mean, the AASHTO book it's called the Green Book, and there's really about 3 manuals: the MUTCD, this. Sure. Sure. Well, I think that manual it's 07 or 09. I don't think it's not that old. And this data, I mean, this stuff's put out by the Federal Highway Administration. I mean, they work on it, and so. Yeah, there's not. Right. There are some in some more complex calculations than just this pretty chart. This is actually kind of easy stuff, I think. I like it. But in some more detailed calculations, there are. Some of that stuff comes in, and it's a sight distance, and there's called a clear zone, and there's some math that comes into the distance between the edge of the shoulder or the travel lane and to the nearest obstruction. So that shoulder gives you a bigger advantage, and it gives you different speed options. And so, yeah. But on this, and the reason I wanted to show you guys this is in the future, if something ever comes up, I mean, you're probably never going to see this chart again, but from the standpoint I can show you, this is pretty much what we're looking at on a left-hand turn lane. There's some other things that come into it for sure, but from the math side of it, this is about what's out there. So it's typically not that simple either. Well, I know as we've been going through our subregs and looking for things in the future, a lot of places quote the AASHTO. The AASHTO Green Book is just a very commonly used policy book on traffic, and this is in there. So I've never seen this actual chart presented in the traffic section, but most places say that the AASHTO Green Book is kind of the guide to fall back on. So that would get this. But I agree with you too, Pettis. I mean, these numbers will change, and that's something that they will do. I mean, that's something. But this is pretty industry wide. Well, that's all I had. I know that was.
I was hoping to feel better after I heard this presentation.
Sorry.
Because when the engineers or whoever get up here and they tell us, it's not warranted. We're using these formulas. It's not justified. I've always been one to kind of, say, I'm not the expert in this field, you are, and I rely on what you're telling me. And, now as I'm looking at these numbers, I'm thinking, like you said, common sense tells me I don't need to rely on this chart, and I don't need to rely on, those estimations, given the nature of our county and the topography of our county and the road widths in our county. So where do we go from here is the big question. What do we do?
Well, what we're trying to do in the new subdivision regs is we're going to cite these AASHTO as that's what we're going to go by. And again, I think the way the staff will do is try to present to you what comes out of that, and along with any concerns we might have or any extra, and then leave the decision up. But again, our goal here is to provide you with more data, more, shall we say, up-to-date data and more valid numbers. And we're going to be telling you at times, based on the warrants, we said this does not justify X, whatever we're trying to look at, as we did on Estes Mill Road. That doesn't mean, again, that takes that power away from you to require those types of things. Right. Right. Yeah, right. Now we've tried to use our counters on 99 out there by the school a couple times I think they actually put them out 3 times, and because that asphalt hasn't cured, we've lost our tubing every time because they yanked them out and actually put them in there one time with almost like a railroad stake, and so they just pulled out a huge chunk of asphalt. So there are limitations to what we can do, but we'll keep trying.
Can be. It can be. I mean, we can look at. Let's say there's a gas station here on the side of the road. We could put we could put counters strategically to where I could do the math and figure out how many cars, percentage-wise, how many going straight, how many going this way, and how many going in. Our counters will, I get a report, and it tells me and I've got it set up to 15-minute intervals every cars, and so I can see, and then it goes through and does all the calculations on peak hour and and like we said earlier, most every road we've ever done them on, between 7 and 8, somewhere between 3 and 6 are your peak hours. It even differentiates lanes, so it knows how many cars are going this way. It'll do speed, and so which is kind of interesting to see late at night how much speed goes up on some of these roads. But it's the capabilities they'll do a lot, and they're pretty simple. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing, but the software can do a lot of math on it. $7,000. Yeah, it would take 2 weeks just to counters. I mean, now, and you can put people out there counting. And in college, I remember we had a professor that did some stuff, and he hired some guys to sit out there in a car and literally count. I mean, if you need to get fast data, you can do it, but those counters are a little bit more productive. But $7,000, I'd say that's probably in line. And it would depend, like Mike, you were saying earlier, talking about Epps Mill. When they're looking at their surrounding development, they're going to look at like Buchanan Estates down there. I mean, they're going to look at that landmass and say, okay, we know this. The master plan on this is saying 500 lots or whatever, so they're going to put that into it. And so, the farther they have to go out, though, knowing that those developments are, the more cost is going to go up.
It's interesting. These numbers, almost all engineering calculation numbers have safety factors put in them. Could be 100%, could be 50% or whatever. If you look at the numbers in the warrants, the subdivision with 100 homes is about where you'd put a turn lane. Yet if you put a subdivision on a state highway, they tell you need a turn lane at 74 homes. And so they've got a pretty large safety factor involved in there. And that goes back to Mike's question about if you're at 80% or whatever. That's the type of safety factor you got involved when you're dealing with some of these numbers.
And what about right-hand turn lanes? What do we do about those? Because I know that comes up a lot of times too with Dollar General stores. Seems like it comes up with every Dollar General store.
You're basically talking about a deceleration lane.
It's a different calculation, and it's a lot more involved than this. And it's really site specific. Everything I've looked on, it's pretty site specific because it just depends on how much shoulder you have and the road characteristics, the speed, sight vision. There's a lot that goes into it. That's why I was happy to find this easy one. See, that's good. A chart. But that's all I have.
Is there a way in the planning process that y'all can make that recommendation to us on the front end, or we're not sitting here, wondering, should we put a turn lane in?
And I think as we do conceptual stuff with the planning and engineering, we look at these sites as they come in. The first time they decide to come in before you guys even see it, that's when we start talking about that stuff. If we see something that's going to be a major impact on a road, that's where we would start talking about. Okay, you're going to break this. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and as a developer, if he had a 1,000-lot subdivision, and we know that that's going to break that 100-lot threshold, they're probably not going to want to wait to the planning commission to get you guys to ask them to do one, and then have to wait that much more time. They're going to want to do that before, and so that's hopefully in the process in the future we'll be able to do that. In the concept phase, we'll be able to, and it'll be spelled out in the zoning regs.
You guys
they'll get off, they'll check intersections some, and so it just depends. And their website's very easy to use. I mean, it's just click on it and they show the whole count, the whole state, and you've got every counter from. You can click on it, and every bit of data they've ever took, it may be 30 years old on there. And so, yeah, so I use it frequently, looking at, because when we're doing counts, a lot of times, if I'm going to look at something, there's already either been a state one there, and so I may put them out just to kind of compare to make sure that, because I think they do theirs once a year. And there's factors and all this stuff, and, you know, because when I first got into this, I thought, well, what keeps a developer from going out there and doing a traffic study on next to a school in July on a Sunday? Even if they do that, there's factors you can correlate all that stuff together. There's conversion factors that take it to the peak. So. Yeah, I mean, and it would go back to that trip generation manual. I mean, that's where you'd look at the combined uses and it. And the hard part on that too, if take Ebbs Mill again, the through traffic, all the cars that are going toward Woodfin Road, going all the way through there, you not only have to look at what they're generating, but they have to account for all those cars that were coming through before, and so they're looking at the big picture. All right. Thank you, guys. I know y'all were ready for that. I know that was exciting stuff.